Living under the weight of a family's towering expectations is no easy feat, especially when their definition of success is tied to boardroom titles and bank statements. I'm Anna Mitchell, and for the last 10 years, I've been the classic example of what not to do in my family. It all began the day I walked away from my secure, high-paying role at Anderson and Mitchell Corp. Yes, that Mitchell, my father's legacy, to launch a consulting firm of my own. To say my family wasn't exactly thrilled would be putting it lightly. "You're wasting a perfectly respectable career," my father had said, every word laced with disapproval. "Vice president at 25, and now you want to be what? A freelancer?" But I'd seen enough during my time inside the corporate behemoth. While my cousins James and Victoria clawed their way up the ladders of Fortune 500 companies, I observed something they hadn't. The real influence wasn't at the top, it lurked in the background. The consultants, the strategists, the ones who dictated how the game was played without ever stepping onto the field. So I started from scratch. No investors, no safety net, just me, a laptop, and a tiny apartment that doubled as an office. I took on any project that came my way, gradually weaving a network of companies, each one a piece of a larger puzzle. After 4 years, every single one of those shell firms funneled back to one name, Phoenix Consulting Group. No one had a clue I was behind it. That was intentional. In the eyes of the business world, Phoenix was governed by an elusive board of directors. But in reality, it was just me, pulling every string, crafting every deal, executing every move from the shadows. Today was the annual family reunion, a ritual that had grown increasingly excruciating with each passing year. Once again, it was being hosted at Aunt Margaret's lavish estate in the Hamptons, a place where social status was measured in acres and imported vehicles. "Anna, sweetheart." Aunt Margaret's voice oozed fake warmth as she greeted me at the entrance. "Still doing that? What do you call it again?" "Freelancing." I returned her smile with practiced grace, gripping my understated Gucci handbag, a previous season's model, though no one needed to know it held contracts worth millions. "Consulting, Aunt Margaret," I replied evenly. "Yes, I'm still consulting." From across the room, James, now the CFO of a tech firm, let out a chuckle behind his champagne flute. "Consulting, huh? Is that what we're calling it now? Thought you were still working out of that. What is it, Way Workspace?" He wasn't wrong. I did maintain a desk at Way Work, but it was just one of several smokescreens to protect the true operation. Victoria, dressed in a suit that could probably pay someone's rent for a year, chimed in smugly. "Poor Anna! 10 years in and still what? A consultant." Aunt Margaret sighed dramatically. "Such a shame. Your father had such hopes for you." I sipped my champagne, concealing the grin forming behind the rim of my glass. If only they knew. Tomorrow, their reality would shatter. Mitchell Tech, James' company, was on the verge of collapse and had recently enlisted help from the most elite consultancy available, Phoenix Consulting Group. Every strategic plan, every financial roadmap, every proposal they'd received, all crafted by me. What they didn't realize was that the consultant they had hired to rescue them was the very same failure they were laughing at now. Tomorrow, they'd sign a $50 million contract giving Phoenix total authority over their restructuring. And that agreement required the physical presence of Phoenix's CEO at the final signing. As I watched my relatives pat themselves on the back and belittle my career, I found myself silently savoring the anticipation. The moment of revelation was approaching, and none of them were ready. My phone buzzed. "Executive Assistant, Sarah. Final revisions complete. Everything is ready for tomorrow's signing." I typed back a simple reply, "Perfect." Then I put my phone away and went back to sipping champagne, allowing them one final evening of misguided superiority. Tomorrow would belong to me. The next morning, I chose my outfit with purpose, a custom-tailored black Chanel suit, not ostentatious, but quietly powerful. It didn't scream wealth. It whispered legacy. My Louboutins echoed on the marble floors of Phoenix Consulting Group's real headquarters, a discreet yet commanding office space in a heritage building downtown. Not the co-working facade my family imagined I toiled in. "Good morning, Miss Mitchell," Sarah greeted me as I entered. "The team is assembled. Legal's gone through the contracts one last time, everything set for Mitchell Tech at 10 o'clock. I smirked, remembering James, proudly boasting about his company's impending transformation. A transformation entirely of my design. Any changes from their side? I asked. Sarah hesitated. Not officially. But your cousin James has been trying to renegotiate terms all morning. He's called 3 times, insisting he speak directly to Phoenix's CEO. I picked up my briefcase, where the finalized contracts rested. He'll get what he's asking for, I said smoothly. Soon enough. Mitchell Tech headquarters loomed ahead as I pulled up in my matte gray Tesla, another choice they often mocked. Why not drive a proper luxury car? They'd sneer. I stepped out, heels clicking, and watched the swarm of executives disappear into the glass building ahead. They had no idea who was about to walk through those doors. I stepped into the private elevator, the card scanner blinking green as my access key was accepted, no hiccup, just as expected. I'd arranged for that access months ago, quietly, when this project first began. By the time I reached the top floor, the boardroom was already buzzing with Mitchell Tech's top executives and board members. James stood at the front, looking self-important in a sharply tailored designer suit. At his side sat Victoria, newly appointed as marketing director. Another family-favorite placement that made my skin crawl. Where's the CEO of Phoenix? James snapped, clearly irritated as I entered the room. We're not finalizing anything without them present. They'll be here, I answered coolly, settling into a seat at the table. Victoria turned toward me, her voice dripping with disdain. Who let you in? This is a leadership-only meeting, Anna. We don't need input from freelancers. Before I could say a word, the doors opened again. Aunt Margaret strode in, followed by my father, of course. She had a seat on the board, and he never passed up a chance to oversee a serious family business affair. Anna! My father blinked in surprise. This is a closed session. You're right. I nodded, rising from my chair. And it's just about to begin. Right on cue, Sarah entered, flanked by a team of Phoenix's corporate attorneys. The room went quiet as they distributed the final contract packets. But we can't begin, James argued, his face tensing. The CEO isn't here. I moved calmly to the other end of the table, the chair opposite his, and placed my briefcase beside me. Oh, but they are, I said, my voice steady and clear, filling the hushed room. The CEO of Phoenix Consulting Group is sitting right here. Victoria let out a short, mocking laugh. Please, you can't seriously be taking credit for setting this up. Don't embarrass yourself. Without a word, I retrieved a small business card from my case, not the one they all knew, the one marked consultant. This one was different, elegant, crisp. It read, Anna Mitchell, CEO and founder, Phoenix Consulting Group. I'm not taking credit, I said, sliding the card across the polished table. I'm taking my seat. James reached for the card, his face paling as he read it. What followed would become the stuff of family legend. Silence. My father picked up the card with a trembling hand, staring at it as if it couldn't possibly be real. This can't be, James stuttered. Phoenix's, they've advised Fortune 500 companies. There. Exactly, I said, unlocking my briefcase. We've handled billion-dollar restructures. And now, we're here for Mitchell Tech, unless, of course, you'd prefer another firm, one that hasn't spent 6 months diagnosing your company's most vulnerable pressure points. I let that linger. Someone, I added, who hasn't already mapped out every mistake. Victoria stood abruptly. She's lying. This is a setup. Sarah stepped forward, handing neatly bound folders to every board member. Inside, you'll find documentation verifying Ms. Mitchell's ownership, she explained. That includes registration papers, a list of major clients, and coverage from industry media. Phoenix has always operated under strict anonymity. That's why her identity has remained confidential until now. Aunt Margaret flipped through the file in disbelief. But the shared workspace, the low-profile clients, your modest lifestyle. I offered a serene smile. Appearances can be deceiving, Aunt Margaret. A lesson I picked up from you, actually. You once told me real power doesn't need to flaunt. I suppose you meant it differently. My father remained silent, his eyes locked on a single page. The financials. His mouth moved, barely above a whisper. $8 billion, he said. You built an $8 billion firm? I returned to my seat and opened the contract before me. Shall we review the terms of Mitchell Tech's restructuring? I believe this document needs my signature. James collapsed into his chair, the wind knocked out of him. The strategies, the restructuring plans, that was all you. Every piece, I confirmed, including the recommendation to appoint a new CFO. I met his eyes without flinching, preferably one without a history of overlooking critical financial risks. Victoria gasped. You're firing him? We're advising a change in leadership, I clarified. Of course, Mitchell Tech has the final say, but under the terms of this agreement, Phoenix reserves the authority to appoint key executives during the restructuring process. You can't do this, Aunt Margaret cried. We're family. Exactly, I said, locking eyes with her. And family should act in the company's best interest, not just their own. I turned toward my father, who still hadn't looked up from the financials. Dad! Finally, he lifted his gaze. What I saw stunned me more than anything that morning. Not anger, not confusion, but something I had never received from him before. Respect. Unmistakable, sincere respect. All these years, he murmured, while we dismissed you, mocked you, you were building this. I learned from the best, I said gently. You taught me business. Aunt Margaret showed me how influence works. James and Victoria taught me what not to do. I combined all of it and built something greater than any of us imagined. I picked up my pen. Well then, I said, shall we sign? The market's waiting. The board members moved one by one, signing the agreement. James looked hollow. Victoria was seething. Aunt Margaret couldn't speak. But my father, he smiled. Once the documents were signed and the lawyers exited, most of the board followed. Only my father remained. I was wrong, he said simply. We all were. Yes, I replied. But that's the game. Sometimes you win. Sometimes you learn. He chuckled, a real laugh. When did you get so wise? Probably around the same time I became the family disappointment. I replied without bitterness. Revenge didn't come from anger. It came from success. That evening, I returned to my real office, a commanding space spanning the entire top floor of a downtown tower. My inbox was flooded with messages. Aunt Margaret wanted to explore opportunities. James hoped to explain things. Victoria sent a vague apology. I left them all unopened. Instead, I turned my focus to what truly mattered, drafting the next phase of Mitchell Tech's revival. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't just a relative anymore. I was the one person none of them saw coming. Their company's savior. Their new authority. Their boss. And I had an empire to run.